Growing up in a small town in Illinois, I was always surrounded by a close-knit community. My childhood was filled with simple joys, riding bikes with friends, fishing in the nearby river, and spending summer evenings playing baseball in the local park. My parents, hardworking and devoted to their family, instilled in me a strong sense of responsibility and the importance of perseverance. These values guided me through my academic years and into my professional life. After completing my business degree, I joined the family retail business, working tirelessly to climb the ranks. My dedication paid off, and by my late 20s, I was poised to take over significant responsibilities within the company. Despite my professional achievements, I felt an underlying sense of emptiness, a void that I couldn't quite fill with work alone. It was during this period of my life that I met Olivia, a woman whose presence promised to fill that void and bring warmth into my otherwise cold existence. It was a chilly, overcast November day when I found myself standing alone in a desolate lot in Chicago. The damp breeze cut through me, amplifying the bleakness of my surroundings. Scattered around were remnants of burnt timber, soot-smeared drywall, and shattered glass, all mingling with light debris that the relentless wind pushed around. This desolate scene seemed to perfectly capture the state of my life, an empty, charred husk of what it once was, filled with coldness, sorrow, and a sense of failure. I nudged a piece of concrete with my foot, lost in thought about how to make the most of the fragments of my shattered life. It was then that I remembered how I met Olivia at a charity event just weeks after I turned 29. At that time, I held a significant position in the family business, and my great-uncle Seth, the CEO and majority shareholder, had urged me to attend the event to network and potentially drum up new business. The evening was dull, filled with overly dramatic, self-important individuals who believed that donating a few $1,000s to build a local library put them on par with saints. I forced myself to smile and nod politely, suppressing my frustration and yearning for an early exit. Then Olivia appeared. She seated herself beside me with a radiant smile, striking up a conversation as though we were old acquaintances. She was graceful and poised, a slender woman with brown hair and bronze skin who exuded confidence and ease in her communication. Suddenly, the tedious fundraiser became much more bearable. I've always been determined and competitive, excelling in academics, work, and sports, but I've never felt comfortable in social settings. After earning my business degree, I focused on my career, which, combined with my social awkwardness, left me with little dating experience. Usually, I only asked out women I had known for a while. However, Olivia's allure was undeniable, and by the end of that evening, I gathered the courage to invite her to dinner. Our date was wonderful, revealing shared interests and easy conversation. I quickly fell in love with her, and the feeling was mutual. We dated for a few months, seeing each other a couple of times a week and frequently becoming physically engaged. I liked her and was eager to be with her, but I wasn't sure how to take the next step without risking rejection. One evening, Olivia took the lead, pulling me inside her house and showing me a level of passion I hadn't experienced before. It was the most enjoyable thing I had ever done. From then on, our closeness became frequent and easy, deepening our relationship. Within a few months, we moved in together, and a little over a year after we met, we got married. We bought a 4-bedroom house in a nice neighborhood, landscaped, got a dog, and life was very good. Marriage suited me perfectly. It ended my loneliness and provided emotional support, physical satisfaction, and mutual love. Of course, there were some issues. My busy work schedule frustrated Olivia, and we both had habits that annoyed each other. One of the biggest challenges was dealing with Olivia's family more than I preferred. I didn't dislike them, they were decent and polite. However, I just didn't want to spend much time with them. Her outgoing parents liked me, but often lectured us on how to live and pressured us to have children. Though slightly annoying, it wasn't a big problem since we didn't see them often. Mindy, Olivia's little sister, and her husband were more challenging. Mindy, a shorter and rounder version of Olivia, mimicked her in every way. They were inseparable, whispering, laughing, and gossiping, often leaving me feeling excluded. Mindy and her husband, Bruce, lived nearby, so we spent a lot of time with them, which was unpleasant for me. Bruce was a tall, fair-haired guy who wasn't very smart in my opinion. He ran his family's struggling furniture store in Joliet and constantly bragged about it as if it were a big success. Despite knowing his business issues, I kept the peace for Olivia's sake, enduring countless evenings listening to Bruce's rants. After 2 years of marriage, Olivia asked me to help Mindy and Bruce. She set a romantic mood with a fancy dinner, candles, and music, and dressed attractively, making me think she wanted a special night. However, she had other plans. She talked about our good fortune and how we could help others. She then expressed concern for Mindy and Bruce's financial struggles, revealing that Bruce owed money and couldn't complete his inventory without assistance. I quickly understood where this was headed and got straight to the point. How much do they need, Liv? She paused, clearly thrown off by my direct approach. After thinking for a minute, she looked at me shyly and said, "He needs $50,000 or $60,000. This will make them free and confident." I almost choked. We were doing well, but most of my money was tied up in a family trust, and that amount would seriously deplete our cash reserves. I knew I could access the trust funds if necessary, but I'd have to explain it to Bernie Blackman, our chief business attorney who also managed the trust. He'd comply but would hassle me to replenish the funds, taking his job of protecting the trust and business very seriously. This was the only time in our marriage that I tried to dismiss Olivia's serious request. "I don't know, Liv. That's a lot of money," I said, frowning. "Mindy says Bruce has some great ideas and that they'll pay the money back right away. They make good money if that's what you're worried about." "I'm sure of it." I wasn't confident in Bruce's ability to repay, but I wanted Olivia to be happy, so I wrote a $60,000 check. I told Olivia we'd have to save until the money was returned. I once heard that lending money to family should be treated as a gift to avoid relationship strain. So in my mind, it was a $60,000 gift to Olivia's sister and her incompetent brother-in-law. Even with the money, I doubted it would solve their problems, but I wanted to please Olivia and her family. 3 or 4 months after lending Bruce the money, I was searching for an important flash drive at home. I often misplace things, so I turned the house upside down. In the guest room, I noticed the bed was unusually messy, indicating someone had hastily made it after lying in it. I mentioned it to Olivia that evening. "Did someone sleep in the guest bed?" "It was pretty unkempt when I checked," I asked, trying to keep my tone casual. Olivia stuttered nervously. I took a nap there earlier. Sorry, I was exhausted from cleaning and didn't have time to fix it." At the time, I trusted Olivia completely and didn't question her explanation. I even found it amusing that she was embarrassed about napping. But this was just the first of several strange occurrences over the next year that, if I had been more observant, would have revealed Olivia's true nature. I believed Olivia when she said her quiet job at a small bookstore suddenly required 5 to 6 hour meetings every Tuesday, and I shouldn't contact her during that time. I also accepted her explanations for the small bruises on her body and the unfamiliar underwear in the wash. Then there was the orange juice issue. Olivia started shopping at a new high-end store and couldn't buy my favorite brand of orange juice. Despite my complaints, she insisted the new store was better and more convenient since it was on her way home from the Tuesday meetings. These grocery trips might not seem suspicious, but they made me start questioning things, leading to a heartbreaking realization. Less than 18 months after the first loan, Olivia hinted that Bruce and Mindy needed more money. Bruce hadn't repaid any of the initial $60,000, and I didn't want to invest in what I saw as a failing business. I brushed off Olivia's requests, but she persisted, saying they needed more inventory and upgrades to avoid losing their business. Trying to be agreeable, I finally agreed to review Bruce's business plan and tour his store. I met Bruce at his store on a Monday morning. He enthusiastically showed me around, introduced me to the staff, and discussed his business plan with confidence. During our half-hour meeting, I diplomatically expressed my doubts, suggesting that unless he optimized costs and prices, he wouldn't see increased customer interest and revenue, even with the changes. I gently suggested he consider selling the business. Bruce was offended and insisted that a facelift was all that was needed to turn things around. I couldn't outright deny Bruce's request for money, so I explained that I didn't have enough personal funds and it would have to come from a trust. I told him I'd talk to Bernie about clearing the way for the loan, but couldn't guarantee anything. My plan was to avoid conflict and make it seem like I tried before blaming Bernie for turning him down. Though cowardly, I wanted to keep peace in the family and avoid losing money. Bernie, in reality, would do anything I asked, but I always emphasized that he had tight control over the trust. He didn't mind playing the bad guy and never complained about it. Bruce nodded confidently, believing he would get the loan. He shook my hand and patted my back, making me feel guiltier as I left. Driving away, I tried to justify my cowardice and dishonesty. While driving, I saw a smaller grocery store called Salvador's, which Olivia mentioned. This was the store that didn't stock my favorite orange juice. It seemed out of place, not near her work or our house, making me question why it was convenient for her on Tuesdays unless she was visiting Bruce's store nearby. Disturbing thoughts began to surface. I made a U-turn, drove past Salvador's, and then back to Bruce's store, parking for a few minutes. I checked my phone and found it was the only Salvador's in Chicago. I spent 15 to 20 minutes considering why Olivia might shop there. I thought about possible reasons: another office, meeting Mindy for lunch, or a nearby fitness club, but my mind kept circling back to a conclusion I didn't want to face. I wanted more information, so I decided to confront Bruce directly. I hurried to the furniture store and noticed their hours posted on the door, open until 8 p.m. on weekdays, but closing at noon on Tuesdays. My suspicion grew. Entering the store, I approached a middle-aged employee who was stirring coffee. "Excuse me, I need to speak with Bruce McCoy urgently. It's about some important financial matters," I said, trying to sound authoritative. He ignored me, continuing to stir his coffee and even taking a sip. Realizing this might be why the store struggled, I repeated my request more urgently. "This is very important. Could you call him for me?" He finally recognized me. "You're the guy who was here earlier with Bruce, right? Come on in. Bruce is meeting with a supplier now, but you can wait in the break room. He shouldn't be too long, maybe half an hour." He led me to the break room and left me with a cup of coffee and the TV remote. My hastily devised plan involved confronting Bruce and bluffing about having hard evidence of his affair with Olivia. I intended to threaten that if he didn't confess, I'd share the evidence with Mindy and the rest of the family. If Bruce was guilty, he'd likely confess. If not, I'd have to live with the embarrassment and maybe make a joke of it. I paced the room, mentally rehearsing my speech, imagining hinting at having photos or films or claiming Olivia had confessed. While thinking about the confrontation, I started absent-mindedly looking around. I flipped through magazines and TV channels before deciding to search for clues. It occurred to me that if they were cheating at the store, it might happen in this break room, possibly on the old couch. I eyed the faded pea-green couch with coffee stains and a torn armrest. It was in bad shape, suitable for a junkyard. Lifting the pillow, I found it was a fold-out bed with messy sheets and yellowed areas, likely from sex. There were lipstick stains and a faint perfume smell. I checked that Bruce was still in his office, then pulled out the bed. Underneath, I found debris: a pen, 0.37 cents in change, a broken coffee cup, an empty tube of KY gel, and a restaurant receipt. The receipt was from a Mexican restaurant Olivia liked, with her smooth, elegant, and incriminating signature. Even though it was circumstantial evidence that could be easily explained away, it lifted the final fog from my thoughts. The oddities about her Tuesday schedule, bruises, unfamiliar underwear, and the messy bed all pointed to a clear picture of infidelity and a deceitful brother-in-law. My plan to scare Bruce into confessing seemed foolish. I needed concrete evidence, and a confrontation could ruin everything. Knowing their likely meeting times and places, I could now gather the proof I needed. I folded up the bed, sat on the sofa, and clenched my teeth in rage, my heart pounding. I had been cheated in business deals and once at cards, but never had I felt such a profound betrayal. I was on the verge of screaming, crying, yelling, and punching the wall. But from this emotional turmoil emerged a burning desire for revenge. I calmed down and began to think about my situation, trying to be as detached and unemotional as possible. I considered Bruce and Olivia's vulnerabilities, and how I could exploit them for satisfaction. My first fantasy was to strike Bruce, but I saw that as a prison sentence. My second thought was to refuse the loan and demand immediate repayment. But I remembered Bernie's advice: if you owe someone money, they have control over you. I wanted to control Bruce. I saw Bruce standing in his office, shaking hands with the supplier. I waved and smiled. He waved back, walked the supplier to the door, and then hurried to the break room. "Hey, Mike, did you forget something? Need more information?" I shook my head and smiled. "Bruce, I want to clarify something. I hope you understand that I think you're a great businessman with a real opportunity here. As I was leaving, I realized I might have come across wrong when discussing your plans if things didn't go as expected." He smiled back. "No worries, Mike. Any good businessman asks tough questions. Great. I really admire what you're doing here. Your family. So this isn't just a safe investment. It's the right decision for you as a friend and family member. I want you to know I'm committed to getting this money for you. While I don't have much in my personal accounts, I'm confident I can get Bernie to approve a trust fund withdrawal." Bruce's grin widened as I spoke. "That sounds great. This business is about to take off. The loan is as safe with me as it is with the bank. No worries." "I'm not worried, Bruce. Bernie will need to draft an agreement to protect the trust with collateral and such. If you're okay with that, you should have the money within a week." The next morning, I walked into Bernie's office, closed the door, and sat down. Bernie was on the phone making notes. He raised a finger to indicate he'd be done soon. Noticing my nervousness, he looked confused after hanging up. "So, Mike, what's got you so nervous this morning?" Bernie asked. Clearing my throat, I leaned forward. "Bernie, I need access to the trust for a large loan," I said. "Shouldn't be a problem. What kind of loan and how much?" Bernie inquired as he turned on his computer and opened a spreadsheet of the trust data. I leaned in closer. "Before we start, I need your absolute confidentiality," I insisted. "Of course, I always," Bernie began. "No, listen. This is unusual, and you might be tempted to talk to Seth or anyone else. I don't want anyone to know what I'm doing," I interrupted. Bernie shifted, looking concerned. "Mike, if this is illegal," he said cautiously. "It's not illegal. I want you to create a document that's completely legal," I assured him. He shook his head, and I continued. "I want to borrow some money and have you draw up loan documents. The terms must be clear, the loan collateralized by the business, and penalties for non-payment very explicit." "It sounds like you expect a default, like you want to trap someone," Bernie observed. "More or less," I admitted. "Who are you trying to trap and why?" Bernie asked. I hesitated, then looked him in the eyes. "I want to trap my brother-in-law, Bruce, and the reason is Olivia," I revealed. Bernie raised his eyebrows in surprise, opened his mouth to speak, but said nothing. Finally, he took a sip of water and asked breathlessly, "Are you sure about this?" "Very," I replied, "very." Within a week, the document was ready, and I personally brought it to Bruce for his review and signature. He asked his lawyer, Tim Sowers, a small, muscular guy, and Bruce's cousin, to join us for the review. "I looked at it last night," Sowers began, "and it's a standard business loan, but there are a few things to note before you sign, Bruce." Bruce smiled, as agreeable and clueless as always. "Of course, let me know," he said. Sowers cleared his throat, glancing at Bruce with what seemed like a hint of contempt. "First, this $425,000 loan is to be repaid over 7 years with a standard rate. Payments of a little over $6,000 per month will begin immediately," he explained. Bruce nodded. "The actual amount you'll receive is $365,000, as we're combining it with the previous $60,000 loan from Mike. Do you understand?" Sowers continued. "I understand," Bruce replied smugly. Sowers sighed and continued. "Next, the loan is secured by your business and the property above Keokuk, where you hunt ducks, correct?" "Yes," Bruce replied, glancing at me. "They want to ensure Mike's trust is protected if the business fails, but that won't happen. The business is in great shape, right, Mike?" "Oh, yes," I said with as much enthusiasm as possible. Bruce showed me the books, and I believe he's got a winner here. But Bernie is very conservative and wants to ensure the trust is protected, even in a worst-case scenario. Sowers frowned and looked at Bruce. "Do you understand that if you default, you could lose the business and even the hunting land?" "Certainly," Bruce said seriously. I understand the consequences, but I'm confident in the business and believe taking out this loan is safer than trying to run the business without it. Do you also understand that penalties begin accruing 3 months after a missed payment? I understand, he said, smiling at me as if we shared a secret. Believing I wouldn't let Bernie impose penalties for minor issues, I simply smiled back. At home, Olivia was thrilled, convinced Bruce's business would now thrive with the additional funds. I restrained myself from saying that Bruce was the real problem and no amount of money could fix it. In the following weeks, keeping quiet about Bruce was the least of my challenges. I needed more information before ending my marriage, so I had to control my fluctuating emotions, ranging from melancholy to rage. Dining with Olivia without confronting her became difficult, and I avoided sex whenever possible. When I couldn't escape, I recalled a degrading encounter from years ago. At 18, during spring break in San Diego, my friends and I ended up in Tijuana. We drank, watched explicit shows, and I reluctantly paired with an older, unattractive woman. Pressured by my friends and heavily intoxicated, I followed her to a grimy room above a bar. To get through it, I pretended she wasn't there, treating her as an object. I used her, blocking out the noise, the filthy room, and her unpleasant smell. In the weeks that followed, I mentally replaced Olivia with that woman during sex, treating her with the same detachment. There was no tenderness, just a biological act. It became easy to be rough and fast, which Olivia eventually noticed and commented on. She complained about wanting more gentle, romantic sex. But overall, she considered our recent encounters an improvement. I thought she could have made money from American tourists in Tijuana. Getting irrefutable evidence of the affair was easier than I expected. Bruce used some of the money to remodel the store, so workers were frequently around. I paid an electrician $500 to place a camera and recording device in a light fixture above the sofa in the lounge room. Within 2 days, everything was set up. I decided to watch the footage at work with a drink and some chips, trying to stay detached, as if watching a movie. Seeing my wife with another man was far worse than just knowing about it. By the end, I was too drunk to drive, had trashed my desk, vomited twice, and thrown a paperweight at my office door. The details were as expected. I sped through the recording until I saw a woman in a blue dress with a large shopping bag enter the room. She changed the sheets, took out a bottle of wine and 2 glasses, then removed her dress, neatly folded it, and waited in thigh-high stockings, French-cut underwear, and a revealing bra. She read a novel on the edge of the bed, reminding me of a performance art exhibition I once saw in New York. When Bruce entered, Olivia put down her book, smiled, and hugged him. Then she pushed him away, scolding him for making her wait. "You know I hate waiting," she said with a playful pout. Bruce laughed. "Sorry, Liv. Got caught up with a customer. You know how it is." "Well, you better make it up to me," she replied, pulling him in for a kiss. After a few minutes, she reached for his belt. The sex was routine, with each anticipating the next move. Bruce's rhythm was constant, like a metronome. Around the 10-minute mark, Bruce finished, and Olivia seemed to as well, stretching out her legs and throwing her head back. They lay silently until he rolled onto his side, and they began to kiss. By the end, I was hurt and furious. The images were etched into my mind, preventing any chance of forgiveness. I was relieved to have a plan to end my marriage. As I leaned forward to turn off the video, I noticed them talking in bed. Olivia lay on her side, drawing patterns on Bruce's chest as they whispered and smiled. "I hate using this furniture store as our love nest. It's so unromantic," she complained. Bruce turned to face her. "Come on, Liv. If we use a hotel, we'll leave traces, and we almost got caught using one of our houses. We have no choice." "I know," Olivia shrugged, "but I wish we had another place. I don't like this room, and changing last week's dirty sheets isn't exciting." Bruce stroked her cheek, smiling. "Well, we could always just run away together." Olivia laughed, but Bruce's expression turned thoughtful. "Seriously, Liv, do you regret marrying Mike? Sometimes I wonder if you think it would have been better if you and I had gotten married instead." Olivia sat up on the bed, leaning against the back of the sofa, arms wrapped around her knees. She looked at Bruce thoughtfully. "Come on, Bruce. How many times do we need to repeat this? What we have is special. Very special. But no, I don't think we would be better off married. We'd be happy together, but I also love Mike, and you love Mindy. If we were together, Mike wouldn't pursue me, and Mindy wouldn't be happy either. She leaned over, kissed Bruce on the cheek, and rubbed his chest. Bruce, people like us can love more than one person at a time. This is right for us. But Mindy and Mike aren't like that. They can't handle their emotions like we do and make everyone happy. Hearing this, my indignation peaked, and I threw the paperweight through the office door. I loved her, or maybe because she was the only woman who ever loved me. I never realized how arrogant and delusional she was. She saw her infidelities as a virtue, not a betrayal, but something that increased love in the world, a moral imperative. I slept on the office couch that night and completed the paperwork the next morning. When I got home the next evening, Olivia greeted me with her hands on her hips and a sour expression. "Where the hell were you last night? I was worried sick. You didn't call or write." "What the hell?" she demanded. I raised my hand to stop her. "I was at work, got drunk, and couldn't come home, so I stayed there," I explained. She looked bewildered. "Wait, what? You got drunk at work?" she asked. I nodded. "Well, you could have let me know. I almost called the police." "Why were you drinking at work?" she pressed. Without answering, I walked past her into the living room, sat on the sofa, put my feet on the coffee table, and opened my briefcase. Olivia sighed indignantly and sat opposite me. "Hey, Mike, what's going on? Why did you drink so much at work? What happened last night?" she questioned. I continued sorting papers, then replaced my feet with the papers on the table and leaned forward, rubbing my hands together. "Okay, let's get started," I said. "Started? What happened last night?" Olivia insisted. "I watched the video," I replied. "Video?" she asked, now confused and fearful. "Yes, the video of you and Bruce having sex on that couch. It was disturbing, so I may have overreacted. Understand?" I smiled thinly as her face went from confusion to shock and fear. She struggled to speak, her eyes darting between the papers, the door, and me. I don't understand, Mike. What are you talking about?" she stammered. "Come on, Olivia. You can't be that clueless. I'm talking about you and Bruce and what you've been doing every Tuesday for a year," I clarified, gesturing to the papers. "I'm talking about the end of our marriage." Olivia gasped, covering her mouth. I waited for her response. "Mike, we can work this out. I can make you understand," she pleaded. "Oh, I understand, Liv," I replied, taking a DVD from my briefcase and pushing it across the table to her. "Last night, I got plenty of information, a goldmine of facts about my loving wife and my friendly brother-in-law." She stared at the DVD like it was a poisonous snake, recoiling slightly but making no effort to take it. "Come on, Liv. This is your copy. I won't say how I got it, but I have my own for future reference and to further study your philosophy of love and devotion," I continued. She started to stand, looking like she might approach me, but I raised my hand, stopping her. She bit her lip, then spoke slowly and deliberately, trying to hide the trembling in her voice. "Mike, listen, you need to think about this. There's no point in destroying our lives because of different values and talents. I love you and have always been willing to accommodate our differences. And I hope that—" I interrupted her with a mocking snort. "Different values and talents? Seriously? Do you think cheating is a talent? Because honestly, Liv, everyone is capable of this. Talent is not the right word." She took a deep breath, looked at the ceiling, then back at me. "Ability. The right word is ability. I have a greater capacity to love, and I can successfully love more than one person at a time. Apart from outdated ideas about love and relationships, there's no reason I shouldn't use my ability." "Just stop. You're annoying me with your excuses. You think you have some special ability that gives you the right to deceive and cheat when you should be faithful, but really, that's just Liv's excuse. Anyone can be involved with multiple people. It doesn't make them talented lovers, just cheaters." Instantly, the apologetic Olivia vanished, replaced by an angry, confident woman. "Are you calling me a cheater?" she snapped. "From your point of view, maybe, but I never lost my love for you or Bruce. I never compromised my feelings because of some medieval code that says I must limit my relationships. So yes, I may look like a cheater to you, but when I look in the mirror, I have no doubts about what I did." She was breathing heavily, her face flushed with a fire in her eyes, and I was done. "Do you want to live like this? An open relationship with different guys, loving one day and another the next? Fine, to each their own. But pretending you didn't cheat or lie is complete nonsense. You never told me you were having sex with Bruce, and you know I wouldn't agree to that. You know it." She turned away, avoiding my gaze, but I made sure she faced me as I continued. "So you lied, by omission, the biggest lie I've ever encountered. You made everyone think we were a committed couple while you were secretly with Bruce, hiding your affairs at the furniture store. You've lied and lived a lie. Your so-called philosophy just makes you a cheater." Tears of anger ran down her cheeks as she shook her head, unable to respond. I waited, but when she said nothing, I pushed the papers toward her. "Read it, find a lawyer, this is real." She finally spoke. "What if I don't want a divorce? Then you're out of luck, Liv, because you're getting one." I paused, then added with a grin, "But hey, that doesn't mean you'll be alone." I moved out that evening, relocating to an apartment closer to work, and quickly reverted to my pre-Olivia self, a worker, a businessman, a loner with no time or interest in socializing. The hours at work became hellish, and it was evident to more than one person. But I knew staying home would make me obsess over Olivia, replaying her affair in my mind, wondering if she thought about me or if she was with Bruce. I had no choice but to immerse myself in work and try to forget about my marriage as fast as possible. In any competition, my natural instinct is to do whatever it takes to win, and most people in the business world knew me for tough, drawn-out negotiations, but that would mean delays, interaction, and pain, and I was willing to pay for a quick and clean exit. I offered Olivia a large lump sum for ongoing support, with the threat of withdrawing it if she didn't agree to a quick divorce. Deep down, I hoped she would object, insist we could make the marriage work, refuse the proposal, and fight for it. I wanted our marriage's chance of survival to matter more to her than money, but that wasn't the case. With some half-hearted objections, she accepted the terms, and within 60 days, my marriage was over. A couple of months after the divorce, Bruce predictably started falling behind on payments. He got appropriate warnings and a harsh letter from Bernie, informing him we would start taking the money by any means. Bruce called and emailed with excuses and promises, practically begging for more time. I instructed Bernie to be tough, making it clear we'd pursue bail as soon as legally possible. On the eve of detention, Bruce begged for an in-person meeting, and I agreed. At that moment, I realized he was desperate and would do anything or take money from anyone to save himself. I wanted the money to come from Olivia. I looked forward to the meeting. We met in my office after work. Most secretaries had gone home, but my assistant Sherry stayed in the outer office, ready to prepare paperwork if needed. Bruce looked more nervous than ever, extending a sweaty hand for a handshake as he walked hesitantly into my office. Behind him, almost timidly, stood Olivia, and seeing her took my breath away. She sat closer to me than Bruce, wearing one of my favorite outfits, fully made up and smiling brightly, clearly trying to sway me with emotional connections. I suddenly had an urge to rush to her, hold her, and kiss her, but recognizing the danger of my feelings, I suppressed the impulse, putting on a grim expression and muttering a reluctant greeting. Honestly, I was more than surprised she came at all. I had anticipated this meeting for a long time and planned it carefully, but I hadn't expected Olivia to be there. Worrying her presence might disrupt my plan to associate her with Bruce's failures. I thought about objecting, maybe asking her to wait outside, but ultimately decided her presence might make the outcome more satisfying. Bruce began by trying to charm me. After shaking my hand, he smiled broadly and made small talk about wanting to make things right, hoping I knew how much he respected me, and expressing his regret over how things turned out. I was shocked he seemed to want to renew the friendship, thinking we could be buddies again. I didn't buy it. Without the slightest smile, I stared at him and cut off his speech as emotionlessly as possible. "Bruce, stop this nonsense. Your apology means nothing to me, got it?" He swayed in his chair, looking as if I'd struck him, then he pursed his lips, took a deep, worried breath through his nose, and nodded before starting again. "Okay, sorry, Mike. Let's get down to business." He looked at me as if it was my meeting expecting me to continue, but I just gestured for him to state his case. Nervously licking his lips and running a trembling hand through his hair, he started explaining how he intended to repay the money, but was currently short on cash. He mentioned how hard Bernie was pressuring him to pay and claimed that his business was on the brink of recovery, needing just a little more time. Finally, he tried to argue that giving him more time would be financially better for me. I leaned back, slowly studying Bruce's nervous smile, the sweat forming on his forehead, and his trembling right hand on the table. "Bruce, if you weren't such a liar, I might consider giving you a break." His eyes widened with surprise and distress, and he leaned forward, ready to protest, but I stopped him with a raised hand. "Come on, Bruce. It's hard to trust someone who didn't hesitate to sleep with his married sister-in-law. Asking her husband for financial help is just ridiculous." Bruce shifted uncomfortably, and Olivia nervously cleared her throat. "Mike, please, you can't punish Bruce because I do what I want." "Olivia!" I snapped, glaring at her. "Why are you even here?" "I thought maybe I could persuade you for old time's sake. I'm still worried about you and thought that—" "You thought wrong. Your presence just reminds me how Bruce screwed me over by screwing you. Do yourselves a favor and sit back, looking nice, and keep comments to a minimum." Tears welled in her eyes and her chin trembled, but she did as I insisted and sat back. I turned back to Bruce. "Here's the deal. You will repay the debt on a strict schedule, or I will start taking everything I can from the collateral." Bruce shook his head aggressively. "Come on, Mike. You can't take my business away from me. You can't. I can. And I will if you don't pay. Get the money, Bruce. Reach out to your family. Find a bank, sell something. I don't care. Just get the money, or I'll take whatever I can. But you know banks won't loan me money. Otherwise, I would have gone to them first. My family can't help. They don't have that kind of money." I looked him straight in the eyes. "Don't tell me your family doesn't have money. I know they do. No, they can't help. They just don't have it." "What about her?" I pointed at Olivia. "Did you ask her for money?" Bruce sat back down. Liv doesn't." I laughed. "Of course she does. I gave her a check for $150,000. She has plenty of money. Right, Olivia?" I looked at her with a smirk, and Bruce looked at her questioningly. He didn't know about the lump sum payment. She suddenly felt nervous, perhaps a little nauseous. "Well, yes, I have it, but I need that money." I laughed again. "Stop, Liv. You thought it was safe to give Bruce money when you convinced me to help in the first place. Why hesitate now? Don't you trust Bruce to get his business back on track? If you think this is a good investment for me, why not for you?" I gave her an expectant, evil grin. She swallowed hard, looked at Bruce, then back at me. Taking a deep breath, she squared her shoulders and said in a vaguely defiant tone that she could cover the difference for a while. Bruce smiled at her, and she weakly smiled back. They left, Bruce walking with more confidence, and Olivia looking disappointed as I held the door open for them. I left them with one last instruction. "Remember, Bruce, I don't care how, I just need the money." "You'll get your money," he spat back. Olivia looked worried. Over the next few months, I tried to find solace in work, staying businesslike and efficient with everyone. I avoided personal conversations and social opportunities, preferring to work or be alone. I tried not to think about my wife's betrayal, but everything reminded me of her, including the monthly check from Bruce on my desk. The check brought a bitter satisfaction, knowing I had plunged the authors of my misfortune into poverty. Things got worse when Mindy contacted me. She emailed several times and even called. I was surprised to learn Bruce and Olivia had confessed to her, likely a softened version of their affair. She took it hard initially, but eventually forgave them both. To my horror, she hinted that she suspected their relationship and that they had reached an agreement to continue seeing each other. She even tried to convince me to take Olivia back. My responses were bitter and harsh, and I'm sure I left her in tears by the second call. After that, I never heard from her again. Mindy's tolerance made it clear Bruce and Olivia paid far less of an emotional price than I had hoped. I feared the store would become solvent. Bruce would pay off his debt, and they would all be satisfied financially and emotionally. They would leave me behind, shaking their heads at the poor soul who couldn't understand modern love. I needn't have worried. The furniture showroom burned down 9 months after I met Bruce and Olivia. It was a spectacular 2-alarm fire that threatened nearby buildings and made the nightly news. I didn't see the coverage, but Bernie did, and he called me immediately to discuss the implications. He was angry, thinking the trust lost a lot of money. I reassured him by promising to personally buy the loan if Bruce defaulted, assuring him the property was valuable due to its location. Questions arose about the fire, and when catalysts were discovered, the insurance company refused to pay. With no income from the store, Bruce defaulted on the loan, and I purchased the smoking ruins of the property and 35 acres of Mississippi duck hunting land. The criminal investigation lasted almost 6 months. Detectives built a strong circumstantial case against Bruce and Olivia. They proved the store was losing money, and Olivia was spending more each month to keep it afloat. Bruce made desperate attempts to secure loans, failed, and then quietly tried to sell the business. There were no buyers, even at a reduced price. Investigators found no evidence that Olivia or Bruce were near the store on the night of the fire or that they bought anything to start it. Their theory was that they hired a professional arsonist. They found numerous searches for arson on Olivia's computer, phone records with 2 men convicted of arson, and a $15,000 cash withdrawal the week before the fire. Olivia and Bruce had a good lawyer, likely funded with her remaining money, and the DA knew it would be a fight, so he started making deals. They likely began with first-degree arson and fraud charges, then negotiated from there. The defense wouldn't settle for less than 4th-degree arson, so a trial date was set. I was on the witness list, waiting in the lobby on the first day, reading the newspaper and tapping my foot on the tile floor. A court official announced the trial was canceled due to a deal, and we could go home. As I gathered my things to leave, Olivia and Bruce walked in with several officers and their lawyer. Reporters jumped up, shoving microphones at them, but they declined to comment. Bruce met with Mindy and left with the officers, but Olivia approached me to talk. I admired her courage under the circumstances. "Well, Mike, is this your lucky day? Is this what you wanted, for me to be punished for my sins?" I laughed bitterly and shook my head mockingly. "I wanted a faithful wife and a successful marriage. I'll never get what I want from you. Absent that, I just want my money." She snorted. "Well, you're not getting any of it now, are you?" "Oh, I got some back, and I have a store." She laughed. "And what are you going to do with it? Has it stopped smoking yet? You'd be surprised what a smart businessman can do with a good piece of property, even a smoking one." Her nostrils flared, and her face hardened. She took a deep breath before speaking again. "And now you're happier alone, without anyone, married to your job for the foreseeable future?" She smirked knowingly. "Don't deny it. I know you. I know how much you hate meeting new people." "I'm working on it. Liv, I loved you, but you're not the only woman in the world." She smiled confidently. "No, not the only one, but I don't think you can find, what do you businessmen call it? An equivalent replacement. Whether you like it or not, you will miss me." I leaned towards her and whispered in her ear, "I might be a little lonely, but you won't be, will you? The good news is, you'll be sharing a cramped space with a bunch of pretty androgynous women with whom you can share all that abundant love. This will be beneficial for both you and the lesbians." Olivia shocked me by losing her composure at my last remark, recoiling as if I were radioactive, her face contorted with contempt, and her eyes flashing with anger. She took a deep breath, her chest heaving, and then she exploded. "You sanctimonious, self-centered, emotionally damaged idiot," she screamed as officers dragged her away. "You'll end up alone, just like me, married to your stupid job." As I watched her scream at me, her love evaporated, leaving only contemptuous hatred. A wave of melancholy hit me. I resisted the urge to show my pain, smiled thinly, and muttered some quips about her offensive language, but she continued her rant. "Time will pass, and I'll move on, but you'll remain alone, wishing you were with me. One day, when you're married to some boring ex-secretary, you'll regret not agreeing." The door closed behind her, cutting off her tirade. I turned and walked out of the courtroom. My day was cleared, and without any meetings, I went to the burnt site, struggling with a growing sense of despondency and loneliness. The temperature dropped, and the wind whipped my jacket and stung my face as I looked around, still wondering what to do with the wreckage. I wasn't sure if I could salvage the situation and considered selling everything to focus on what I had always done. It was safe, maybe even smart, but I knew there was another option, take a risk and rebuild, maybe even open another furniture store. I thought about successfully selling furniture from the same place where Bruce failed, with lots of advertising and billboards. I could even call it Olivia's and have last-minute sales. It struck me that the decisions I faced about the site mirrored those I made in my life. Olivia was right about me. My natural inclination before meeting her was to withdraw, avoid closeness, and focus on work. I saw myself heading towards a lonely, financially secure but joyless existence. I was becoming what suited me, doing something safe. Sitting on a concrete block, I looked around again, weighing my options, contemplating my future. I was about to leave and go back to work, postponing the decision for another day, when a few rays of late afternoon sun filtered through the clouds and illuminated the graffiti-covered wall across the street. The light cast a burning orange glow on the wall, making the words stand out. Take action. I've always been disdainful of superstitious people who let irrelevant things rule their lives. But sitting on that concrete slab in the November cold, those words felt like fate, a message from God. I took out my cell phone and called the office, reaching my assistant. Hey Sherry, who's the architecture firm that designed the new shopping center with the glass and fountains? I asked. Hummer, she replied. Something like that, I think, she replied, chuckling lightly while checking. Yes, Hammerstone. They're based here in Chicago. Okay, could you arrange a meeting with them as soon as possible? I requested. She hesitated. Are we building something? She asked. I looked around, imagining the new store, and felt a surge of confidence. Yes, I think we are, I confirmed. Okay. Sure, boss. Anything else? She inquired. I chewed my lip as my eyes fell on the graffiti again. Yes, Sherry, there is one more thing. Do you remember that representative in the counterfeit jeans, the tall blonde Brenda? Brenda White, I think, I added. Yes. Sherry's voice became increasingly incredulous, and I wondered if she thought I was having a breakdown. Do you want her number? She asked. Of course. Do you want me to connect you? She offered. No, I'll call her myself. Thank you, I responded. The scene unfolded on a chilly November afternoon as I drove through a less frequented part of town with Brenda, my new girlfriend, by my side. The once familiar roads were now dotted with signs of decay, broken streetlights, and graffiti-covered walls. The car's heater hummed softly, providing a stark contrast to the bleakness outside. Brenda and I were on our way back from an afternoon outing, and the kind of carefree day I had grown accustomed to in the 2 years since my divorce. Brenda, with her vibrant personality and infectious laughter, had brought a breath of fresh air into my life. She was chatting animatedly about our plans for the upcoming weekend when I noticed a figure by the roadside, waving desperately. The woman appeared disheveled, her clothes tattered, and her hair matted. I slowed down instinctively. My curiosity piqued, despite Brenda's slight hesitation. As we drew closer, the woman's features became more distinct. Her face was gaunt, her eyes hollow, and she moved with a sort of desperation that spoke volumes about her circumstances. My heart began to race, a gnawing sense of familiarity clawing at the edges of my mind. I pulled over, my hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. Brenda turned to me, concern etched on her face. Are you sure about this, Mike? She looks pretty rough. I nodded, unable to tear my eyes away from the woman approaching the car. When she was just a few feet away, recognition hit me like a freight train. It was Olivia, my ex-wife. The transformation was shocking. The woman who once exuded grace and confidence now looked like she had been to hell and back. She was a shadow of her former self. I rolled down the window, the cold air rushing in. Olivia leaned in, her eyes darting nervously between me and Brenda. There was a moment of silence, heavy with unspoken words and shared history. Mike, is that you? Her voice was raspy, as if she hadn't spoken to anyone in days. I nodded, struggling to find my voice. Olivia, what happened to you? She glanced at Brenda, her face flushing with a mix of shame and recognition. I need help, Mike. I'm in a bad place. Brenda shifted uncomfortably in her seat, but I held up a hand to keep her from saying anything. Get in the car, Olivia. We'll talk. She hesitated for a moment, then walked around to the passenger side and climbed into the back seat. The smell of alcohol and stale cigarettes filled the car, and Brenda crinkled her nose, looking at me questioningly. I pulled back onto the road, driving aimlessly as Olivia began to tell her story. After our divorce, Olivia had stayed with Bruce, her lover, and my former brother-in-law. Initially, things seemed to be going well for them, but it wasn't long before Bruce's true colors showed. He had promised Olivia the world, but in reality, he was sinking into debt faster than he could borrow money to cover it. When the furniture store burned down, any chance of a stable life went up in flames. The insurance company refused to pay, suspecting arson. Bruce was left with nothing but mounting debts and legal troubles. Olivia tried to stick by him, but Bruce's charm quickly turned to cruelty. He blamed her for their misfortunes, accusing her of bringing bad luck. When he finally abandoned her, he left behind nothing but a pile of debt and a shattered woman. She had no money, no home, and no family willing to take her in. Her parents, disappointed and ashamed, had refused to help, and Olivia found herself spiraling into a life of alcohol and despair. "I thought I could make it work with Bruce," she whispered, her voice cracking, "but he left me with nothing, Mike, nothing but debts and broken promises." I glanced at her in the rearview mirror, a mix of anger and pity swirling inside me. The woman I had once loved had been reduced to begging on the streets, a victim of her own poor choices and the manipulations of others. Brenda reached over and squeezed my hand, offering silent support. "Olivia, you can't keep living like this," I said, my voice firmer than I intended. "What are you going to do now?" She looked out the window, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know. I wanted to go back to my parents, but they won't take me. I've been staying with some guy in his trailer, drinking myself into oblivion." The car was silent for a moment. The weight of her confession hung heavily in the air. I pulled into a nearby parking lot and turned to face her. "You need to get help, Olivia. Professional help. This isn't just about money anymore. You need to get sober and get your life back on track." She nodded, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. "I know. I don't know where to start," she said. Brenda spoke up, her voice gentle but firm. "There are shelters and rehab centers that can help. You need to take the first step, Olivia. We can help you find a place, but you have to commit to changing." Olivia looked at Brenda, then at me, a flicker of hope in her eyes. "Do you really think I can do it?" I reached back and took her hand, squeezing it reassuringly. "I know you can. You just have to want it badly enough." We spent the next hour making calls, finding a shelter that could take Olivia in and provide the support she needed. As I drove her there, a sense of closure began to wash over me. This was the end of a chapter, a painful but necessary part of moving on. Brenda held my hand, and I felt a renewed sense of hope for the future. When we finally arrived at the shelter, Olivia turned to me, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Mike, for everything. I'm so sorry for what happened between us." I nodded, unable to find the right words. "Take care of yourself, Olivia. You deserve a second chance." I watched Olivia walk towards the shelter's entrance, her steps faltering as she glanced back at me one last time. Her face, once so full of life and ambition, was now etched with deep lines of regret and despair. The stark contrast between the woman she had become and the one I had married struck me profoundly. "Mike," she called out, her voice trembling, "I really am sorry for everything." I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "Sorry doesn't change what you did, Olivia. You made your choices, and now you're living with the consequences." Her eyes filled with tears, but she nodded, accepting my words. I turned away, my heart heavy but resolute. As Brenda and I drove off, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of satisfaction at the justice served. Olivia's downfall was harsh, but self-inflicted. "Are you okay?" Brenda asked softly, her hand resting on my arm. I nodded, a small smile tugging at my lips. "Yeah, I think I am. Thanks for being here with me." She leaned over and kissed my cheek. "Always, Mike, always." As we drove into the fading light of the evening, I realized that while the scars of the past would never completely fade, they no longer defined me. I had found the strength to move on, to build a new life with someone who truly cared for me. And for the first time in a long while, I felt hopeful about what the future might hold. However, just when I thought the chapter with Olivia was closed, life threw one more cruel twist my way. It was a bleak Tuesday afternoon, and I was at work, immersed in a project, when my phone rang. The caller ID showed an unfamiliar number, but something compelled me to answer. "Hello, this is Dr. Harris from the rehab center. Is this Michael?" The The voice on the other end was calm, but carried a weight that made my heart sink. "Yes, this is Mike. Is something wrong?" I asked, already fearing the worst. "I'm afraid I have some bad news. Your ex-wife, Olivia, she took a large number of pills last night and passed away. We found a letter she wrote addressed to you." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I sat down heavily, the phone pressed to my ear. "A letter?" I managed to say, my voice barely more than a whisper. "Yes," Dr. Harris continued gently. "I'll read it to you if you like, or we can send it to you." "Please read it to me," I replied, bracing myself for the words that would follow. Dr. Harris cleared his throat and began. "Dear Mike, by the time you read this, I will be gone. I know I've caused you unimaginable pain, and there's nothing I can do to undo the damage. I regret everything, the lies, the betrayal, the hurt. You didn't deserve any of it. You were a good husband, and I failed you in every way possible. I'm asking for your forgiveness, though I know I don't deserve it. Please, find it in your heart to remember the good times we had, and not just the mistakes I made. I'm so sorry, Mike. Please find happiness. You deserve it more than anyone I know. Yours, Olivia." The words struck me like a physical blow. I felt a lump rise in my throat, my vision blurring as tears welled up. Despite everything she had done, the pain she had caused, her plea for mercy touched something deep inside me. The finality of her death, her ultimate surrender to despair, was almost too much to bear. Brenda found me sitting at my desk, staring blankly ahead. She gently took the phone from my hand and ended the call with Dr. Harris. "Mike, what happened?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. I swallowed hard, trying to compose myself. "Olivia, she's gone. She took her own life." Brenda's eyes widened in shock, and she wrapped her arms around me, holding me tightly. "I'm so sorry, Mike." I buried my face in her shoulder, finally letting the tears flow. The mix of emotions was overwhelming. Anger, sadness, guilt, and a deep, aching regret. Olivia's letter, her final words, echoed in my mind. She had been a part of my life for so long, and despite everything, a part of me still cared. Days passed in a blur of grief and contemplation. The letter stayed with me, its words etched into my memory. I found myself thinking about the good times, as Olivia had asked, but also the many what-ifs and missed opportunities for reconciliation. Her death was a tragic reminder of the fragility of life and the enduring impact of our choices. In the end, I realized that forgiveness was not just about absolving Olivia, but also about finding peace for myself. Holding on to the anger and pain would only